All right. Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well today. I am Josh Canning. This is my wife, Lisa Canning. We are Persevere Together, and we are here to help you. If you're a married couple and experiencing mental illness, we're here to help you navigate that through sharing our experiences because we've been doing this walk for a very, very long time, and we feel that talking about it can help others feel maybe a little bit less isolated and maybe share some practical tips along the way. How are you doing today, Lisa?
I'm wonderful. We try to come on here every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern live. And this is our regular way to connect with you, to share from our heart why we think that it's possible to live with mental illness in your marriage and to not lose hope. So if you're new to us, say hello in the comments. Please subscribe and share with anyone that you can think of that might appreciate this resource.
Awesome.
How are you?
I'm feeling great. I'm on my second coffee. It's really, really good. Got a lot of espresso in it, and I'm feeling very fine.
You've had a really good couple of days.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. And if it's your first time here, I'm the one who has clinical depression and anxiety. It's been a very nice week. I feel good energy, and I'm glad to be here today. Today we're talking about how to support a depressed spouse without feeling overwhelmed. Obviously, being in the situation of being there for your husband or wife who is depressed is it can be a burden to carry. It can be a lot of work. It can be overwhelming. Lisa knows what this is like, and so I'm going to be asking her questions. If you're in that boat, or if you think your spouse is depressed, this should be helpful for you. So, Lisa, how can you offer empathy without being completely debilitated and overwhelmed by the stress that is involved in supporting a spouse with depression?
I think the very first thing to remember is that you can only control you. I remember when we were first starting out on this journey, just like in marriage alone, not even with mental illness, but I was like determined to change many things about you in our married life.
Yeah.
That's just not nice. It's just not nice. It's also not practical. Like you just cannot. You have no control over how other people behave. You can only control your reactions. And so I think that's the very, very, very first place to begin with. You can only control you. Now, how do you do that? That's the thing, is you've got to make mental illness not about you. Now, I can hear the people in the back asking, how on earth do you do that? You know, you're married. There might be things that are frustrating. There might be things that are disappointing, whatever. You still have to make it literally like not, there is a way that you can react and not take things personally. Like it is possible. Not that you're not an inhuman person. So meaning you can be disappointed, you can be frustrated, you can have all the human emotions and hold space for those emotions. Do something that'll make you happy. Call a friend when you're frustrated or disappointed. But then to remember that you can control your reaction to that particular situation. That's honestly a massive strategy to preventing and just circumventing overwhelm.
So going deeper into that, I can think of comments on previous videos where people say, so what, but his depression or her depression makes me feel like I'm a doormat. Is there any real space for me and for my needs? So maybe can you say a little bit about how to have healthy boundaries, particularly like if a depressed person, maybe their depression is manifesting in the sense of criticizing the spouse or blaming the spouse or blaming their life for this person's inability to cope. Maybe just say a little bit about how to have good boundaries.
So before I get to boundaries, feeling like a doormat, I know this is going to sound crazy, but feeling like a doormat are your thoughts. Like it's your thoughts about that situation that are making you feel like a doormat. Is there some truth? Like, meaning, are you being overly criticized? Is that not nice? Is that not kind? That may be true, but it's actually your thoughts about being criticized that are making you feel like a doormat. Okay. I believe that it's possible for one to be criticized. And yes, it's going to hurt. And yes, it's going to sting. But you can hold that captive. Like you can take those thoughts of being criticized and literally put them in a box and put them at the foot of the cross. Like, I mean that really sincerely. Perhaps it might be helpful to come up with an example.
Yeah. So imagine that your spouse comes out and the house is messier than that they would like, and so they begin to just dig at you. Like, I work so hard and you can't help keep our house clean. Like, this is unacceptable, and you're blah 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 blah. And we could say, like, it's not the spouse's fault. The house is messy. You have kids together. It is what it is. But it's just kind of like, like I've said in other videos, and I've had this thought, my anxiety sometimes finds a dance partner. Like I'm anxious. I'm not thinking about it in a logical way or rational way. And so it finds something and it just says, this is not acceptable.
Right.
Okay. And so that can feel personal, obviously, to the spouse who's saying, like,
great example. All right. So my initial very human reaction to that might be something like, he doesn't appreciate me. He doesn't respect me. He doesn't see all the things that I do. I can't believe him. Those are all thoughts. Okay. Mm-hmm. They're all very human thoughts. But one could also be like, that's an interesting reaction. That's an interesting reaction is my favorite phrase because it can make, honestly, a lot of things neutral. Like, an interesting reaction is not necessarily a good one. It's not necessarily a bad one. And what I love is that it just puts a temporary pause. Like, it puts a brief pause on your own reaction. And so then one might be able to respond with something like, I'm so sorry, this is really frustrating. Mm-hmm. What would be helpful right now? Now, if you need to have a conversation about the division of labor, about how we clean up, about systems in the home, absolutely, you still need to have that. But maybe you don't have it in that moment. And that's what I mean about boundaries. Mm-hmm. It's like you can still be frustrated. You can, perhaps you are genuinely not appreciated. There might be some merit to the things that are going in your head. But getting into a conflict in that particular moment, when your spouse is anxious, when your spouse is already in a bad state, just is not going to help you. And so I really do believe that one of the principles is just absolute agency over your own thoughts and doing your very, very best to not take things personally.
I really like that. And it's it also reminds me, it's kind of, we often bring in analogies, but it reminds me of, okay, so on that point, what you described is a person not matching the intensity of perhaps the reaction from their depressed spouse. It makes me think of our kids used to have a nanny, and her name was Princess. And I learned from her as a parent a bit of a strategy, which is when your kids are flipping out, you don't have to come in anywhere near their emotion level. Mm-hmm. Like you can. I remember saying, "No, Joseph, don't say I hate you, Tita." It's
but like very calmly.
So the kid's exploding, and she's completely dispassionate.
He's like yelling at her, "I hate you, Tita." Yeah. I remember.
But so basically, in a way, it's saying, like, you don't have to let someone else's mood dictate your response. At the same time, you're not a doormat, and you can also dispassionately tell somebody, it's not right that you speak to me that way, and when you're calmer, I'd like to talk about this.
But see how that's very different than like, I can't believe you said that to me. Like, that's very, very different. Mm-hmm. Putting a very strategically having that conversation is very, very, very important. And again, will that require some self-mastery? 100%, mm-hmm. And this is why, again, I feel like it's the duty, and I feel like that's why, I'm here with my particular set of skills for the person supporting. It's just time to arm up. It's time for you as the person supporting the spouse with mental illness to just almost see it as a bit of a way to love your spouse is to work on your ability to take agency over your thoughts.
So I'm going to ask you a question that can have two kind of sides to it, but what are some strategies for being a consistent support system to your spouse without burning out? So one side of that could be, how do you kind of arm yourself to be a support system? And two, how do you like, I don't know if the word is pamper yourself or take care of yourself or, make sure that you're not always like, you're not wound up from the experience of being a supporting spouse.
So number one is to remain as much as possible in a state of grace. So what does that mean? You're getting yourself to confession. You are putting in your repetitions in terms of your prayer time, regular visits to the sacraments, because I can just tell. Do you remember the other day?
Oh, where's this going?
The other day, I have some new prayer commitments that I'm trying to commit to. Okay. I got home from one of them and the house was a mess, right? And I'm not going to lie. Normal Lisa probably would have been like, what is happening here? But filled with grace, Lisa was, to be honest, I just was like, oh, the house is messy. And I mean that I'm speaking lightheartedly, but I mean it very, very sincerely, that a life of prayer, a life of grace can help to just firm you up, like really like fortify you. And so I do think that's really, really important. Number two is you do have to find some things in your life that bring you joy and just fill your cup. So that can be anything. That can be, you enjoy a cup of coffee alone. You do something with one of your kids that you both really enjoy. Like I'm just talking basic, fill your cup with things that make you happy. And then number three, I do think it is important to receive some kind of mental health support for yourself. So that can, I've said this many times on this channel, this could look like your own counseling, your own therapy. 100%. I think everyone needs a spiritual director. It could be a coach like me, but you do. I think it's helpful to, number one, have a safe space to vent, to have a safe space to fall apart. Sometimes you are carrying a very heavy load. And so you need that safe space to fall apart. It could also be a friend who allows you to be that safe space. Like they're not necessarily jumping into advice or they're not necessarily jumping into criticism. It's the kind of person, I've got a couple people in my life. I'm very grateful for them locally who I know I can text and be like, I'm having a really hard day. Is there any way you could make double dinner and bring it over? And then they will,
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I love that a lot. So on the topic, so you mentioned on the topic of responding to a bit of an intense or not crisis, but like an intense situation with your spouse. Maybe some things you can say internally or ways in which you can respond verbally. What about in the less intense moments? How can you cultivate kind of an active listening and perhaps inviting conversation so that you have a sense of where your spouse is at in that given moment? Like you said earlier in this call or on this video, that I've been having a good week, if it wasn't such a good week, what would be some ways of kind of unpacking that so that you are supporting, but you're also aware of what's going on internally in your spouse, and there's this line of communication open so that you're kind of, you're getting on as much on the same page as possible.
I think an important phrase in any marriage is tell me more about that. Because again, I'm looking for these phrases that are somewhat neutral. Tell me more about that. So if somebody criticizes you, gives you some negative feedback, tell me more about that. Like it's not, again, it's neutral. It's neither, you're not saying, wow, I believe everything you're saying, but you're also inviting that feedback, right? So I love tell me more about that. It also is just it sounds like a strange word to use, but discipline. Like it's the discipline of I'm going to connect with my spouse and I'm going to intentionally drop any agenda I have. So meaning any laundry that needs to be folded, any messages that need to be checked. I'm not always great at this, but I do try to make a concerted effort to not look at my phone, like when I'm in Josh's presence, especially in the evening when we do have about an hour that we really do like to connect. We don't necessarily do that every single day, but I do think it is a bit of a discipline when mental illness is present in your marriage. That margin, that space for each other is even more vital. I mean, I think it's vital in any marriage, but it's particularly important.
You really got to guard your own mental health. Like mental illness can wreak quite a bit of havoc on a marriage. It's often cited in divorce, very sadly, very tragically, and that can often lead to, believe it or not, like multiple mental illness, not just the person who was initially diagnosed, but there's mental illness that can set in from bearing a burden for a very, very long time. So you got to take care of yourself. And Lisa, I don't know if you have just in one or two kind of maybe just really simple hacks for winding down a day and guarding your own mental health. Maybe it's like a warm bath or a good book or something
Sure.
like that. But how do you just maybe for somebody who's new in this walk?
Before I get to those, I didn't actually give like I want to offer a couple thoughts that are really helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
This might sound, I don't know. Some of you might not like what I'm about to say, but thoughts that often go in my head. This is kind of annoying, but that's okay. This is kind of annoying, but that's okay. And for me, what that does for me is it acknowledges that something is frustrating. Again, I think that's the thing I really want to emphasize today is that it's all right if you're annoyed. It's all right if you find something frustrating. Like it's a human reaction. Nobody expects anybody to be a robot. And that's actually like more damaging. Like when you're not accepting or acknowledging your own emotions, it's actually really, really damaging for you. It can be really damaging for you. So one thought I have is, this is annoying, but that's okay. I also sometimes think literally, you don't have to take this personally. That's just a thought that I literally have in my mind. Like, you don't have to take this personally. Sometimes I do take it personally, but you don't have to take this personally.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes I have a thought that's just like, literally, it's okay that Josh is annoyed. Because again, this goes, this is probably a longer conversation than we have for this particular talk, but it's like the fear of what will happen because your spouse is annoyed or because your spouse is anxious can actually become way more blown out of proportion than merited, right? So I'm trying to think of another example. Let's just use the house being dirty, right? So this time you've come out of a day of work, the house is dirty and you're annoyed and I'm standing there. Like, what if it is completely okay that your spouse is annoyed? You might be thinking, a previous version of me might have been like, oh my gosh, if he's annoyed, the rest of our evening is ruined. We were supposed to have people over. I was going to ask him if it was okay if I could go out with a friend tonight. Now, that's for sure not going to happen because he's so annoyed. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And then you're actually just making yourself more anxious. Whereas if you can say to yourself, it's actually okay that Josh is annoyed. I really actually think this is like a pivotal piece of this conversation because when you're able to accept he's annoyed, but your marriage is going to be okay. Or like even that evening is going to be okay. That's going to put you in a posture of a lot more optimism. Maybe like you're going to be a little bit more conciliatory. You might just give him a little bit more grace or a little bit more whatever, like just allowance. Like that's just going to produce a much better result than spiraling around, oh my gosh, like if he's annoyed, then this is going to happen and this is going to happen. Like, that's just like not fun. It's like, nobody wants to be there. Right. So, okay. Back to the self-care question. I am a big proponent of anything that physically helps you. So a bath, magnesium in the bath.
You can get both actually in bath salts.
Really?
Yeah. Oh. The melatonin one knocked you out, but like there's magnesium and melatonin help very good for sleep.
So like things that will help your body relax and go to sleep. I am recommitting to some different prayer things. One thing I have found, this is kind of a fun resource, is the sung liturgy of the hours. Just like search that. And I believe his name is Paul Rose, and he sings the liturgy of the hours. That's it. There's no commentary. It's like just sung, and it's a beautiful for the central nervous system. It can just be a very beautiful thing. There's things like the Hallow app that have, again, just very, very simple. Like you don't have to think about it. And
which, by the way, finish your thought, but if underneath this video, we have a 3-month trial for Hallow app. It's an affiliate link. We get like a few dollars for it. But we actually did a meditation for the Hallow app for this past Lent, talking about our journey. So if you'd like to have a prayerful meditation about this, if you're experiencing it, that's below.
But the point I'm trying to articulate here is that the anxious mind is worried about the future. The person supporting the anxious mind can also be worried about the future. And so we just need things to help regulate the central nervous system, to regulate your body so that your mind can also kind of like just calm down as well, right? If your body is dysregulated, it's going to be a lot harder to get your mind to calm down. And so things like the bath, things like something very peaceful, can be very helpful.
A really good evening routine, sleep hygiene routine, you know.
I don't have a great one. This is something I've been talking about for years and years. Like I have like an adequate one, I would say. A lot of people in my life.
Is your evening routine work until you pass out? That's what it looks
problem.
like.
I keep saying I'm going to work on it, but I don't really work on it. But anyway, I have a lot of people in my life who have really, really healthy evening routines.
So we've hit on a few different dimensions of the human experience, right? So that was the physical, and the physical can impact our thoughts, which we talked about, so that we're rational beings. We can choose to use or discard a thought. This is a practice that we can build up. I'm still working on it, of course, but you don't have to think the things that immediately occur to you in a situation, the learned kind of responses. And then we talked about the spiritual, that we're not alone in this. We can call upon grace and our Lord's help in these situations. We can cultivate new virtues through the help of the Holy Spirit. We can call upon the virtues of the sacrament of our marriages, and these things can all be a great help to us. We believe that you can use these things, that you and your spouse can persevere together, and that good times are ahead. Thank you for joining us. I hope you will subscribe to this channel and share it with somebody you might know that's going through things like this. But that's it for today.
We look so mature today.
Well, look at us.
Do you see?
It's almost like we
look very like.
Yeah. I agree.
Wise.
Learn from our maturity. This beard has a lot of wisdom and a lot of
we're not
mileage.
Spring chickens anymore. When we started creating these videos, we were a lot younger.
Yeah. Google young Lisa and Josh Canning, and you'll see some different pictures.
Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.